around the world there is a growing awareness that unless we get financial inclusion for women, we are not going to achieve the kind of global growth that the world needs to see in order to empower those people who are at the moment living in poverty. And you're also right that all the research shows that there is a particular gender gap between men and women. I'm not talking of this as a problem only for the emerging markets. This is a problem across the world. Across the world, women do not have the same access to banking services that men do. However, you won't be surprised to know, but in sub-Saharan Africa, the problem is greater. And I was surprised, however, to learn that the place where the gap is biggest in Africa happens to be Nigeria. Financial products about 34% compared to 54% of men. So the gap there is bigger than the rest of Africa.
What is responsible for the low percentage rates of financial inclusion for women in Africa?
First of all, there are legal problems about women getting access to capital. And as a lawyer, of course, that always appeals to me because we can do better. A lot of the time when women are wanting financial services, they're asked to provide collateral. And often that collateral is expressed as land. If you don't have registered land, if you don't have women having ownership of land, then it's much more difficult for them to provide that sort of collateral. Sometimes women, often women are not as well educated as men, and they may not actually have the financial literacy to talk the language of the banks. So that's why I'm here today to celebrate this project that we have been doing here in the Lagos Business School, and particularly in the Enterprise Development Centre of that, thanks to money from the ExxonMobil Foundation and with our partner Diamond Bank. And what we've been doing is helping women entrepreneurs who are already having businesses talk the language of the bank. So they need to know what cash flow means, how you show cash flow projections, how you devise a business plan, how you do business spreadsheets. Then, when you go to the bank, you can present to them a package so that you're talking in each other's language. A third obstacle, I'm afraid, is the fact that women aren't always taken seriously. And in banking, for example, a lot of the times when women go into banks, it's very much a male-dominated environment. Only 20% of the employees are women. So this means that sometimes some of those men may have attitudes towards women which reflect a rather old-fashioned culture. The final obstacle is the women lacking confidence themselves, perhaps because they've been told, girls don't do that, or you can't be serious to want to run your own business, or perhaps because they just feel that they don't know enough. And a lot of research has shown that women often downplay their skills, whereas men upplay their skills. So we are trying to work on all four of those obstacles in order to help women get access to capital.
What are the implications on a typical African nation where there is a lot of financial exclusion for women?
Recent research has shown that if every woman in the world was equally economically empowered as the men in the world, you would actually add $28 trillion to the world economy. Now, realistically, as the research itself agreed, it was by one of the accountancy firms, that you're not necessarily going to be able to get women in emerging markets having the same level as the men in America, for example. But what they also did was they saw, well, what about if you at least get women to have the same kind of opportunities on average in their region? But clearly, we are not using our resources and our assets well if we ignore the skills of women.
You're in partnership with a lot of organizations, Facebook, for example. How do women in rural sub-Saharan Africa benefit from this platform?
20 years or so, and particularly in the last 10 years, has been the fact that there are now more mobile phones in the world than there actually are people. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that every person in the world has a mobile phone, because some, like me, and I suspect you, probably have more than one, if you take into account tablets and others. But it does mean that you can go out here and you can go to the deprived areas of Lagos, or you can go up to the north of Nigeria, into the rural areas, and you will find people on their mobile phone. This is their access to the outside world. It's their access to financial services. We've seen a huge growth in mobile banking. One of the projects that we're doing here in Nigeria, for example, is with Visa, where we're helping train women to be Visa money agents, which not only gives them a great source of income, but it also brings financial services to the unserved communities. All of these things mean that the poor, who previously have been untouched by the sort of thing that we might take for granted, a bank account, ability to insure perhaps for medical purposes, the ability to save for your child's education and earn some interest, the ability to take a loan, all of those things you and I can do, but they have not been things that the poorest in our societies have been able to do, particularly in the rural areas. The mobile phone is changing that, and it's changing it rapidly and exists. So we have to do more, but it's a wonderful opportunity. It enables the poorest in the world to get access to things they could only have dreamed of in the past.
How accessible are funds for intending female entrepreneurs or already existing businesswomen in Africa?
Well, interestingly, before we came into Nigeria for the first time, we commissioned some research. My foundation commissioned some research by Booz & Co. And we were looking at market women in Nigeria and seeing whether they do they have a mobile phone? Would they use a mobile phone? And as a result of that research, we found the answer to those things was yes. And we also found that the women would be prepared to pay for the use of the mobile phone if it benefited their business. And that led to a project that enabled us to reach 100,000 Nigerian women and 20,000 Nigerian men. It was called the Business Women app. And it was a series of text messages, hints and tips aimed at market women to help them do better business. That this is a very accessible way to push information down to people where they are, so that they can access the text messages whilst they're still working, in their times when they've got a bit of free time. They can have those text messages and keep them and learn it as a resource material.
What is your message to the world on financial inclusion for women, especially women in sub-Saharan Africa?
Financial inclusion for women is a must-have in the 21st century. Without financial inclusion for women, we will not see the growth and development that the world needs in order to ensure that every person, man and woman, gets an equal chance at the best possible life.